The Story Dragon podcast presents The Cat from Another Dimension. Steve had always wanted a pet, but for some reason, he never put in the effort to make it happen. He was laid back and liked to relax, so he wasn't sure if he wanted to put in the work that would be required to make sure his home was ready for one. One rainy evening, a sleek cat appeared at his apartment door. Its fur shimmered strangely in the light from the hallway, and its yellow eyes seemed too intelligent for a cat. Feeling a mix of curiosity and sympathy, Steve let it in. At first, the cat acted normal, lounging in sunspots on the carpet, curling up in Steve's lap, and playfully batting at dust mites in the air. But a few nights after it showed up, things started to get a little weird. One evening, Steve woke up thirsty and shuffled into the kitchen. As he passed the fridge, he froze. The cat, now standing upright on its hind legs, had the door open. It was peering inside. Its paw hovered over the milk carton, as if deciding whether or not to take a sip. Steve blinked. The cat blinked back. He rubbed his eyes. "I must be dreaming," he muttered, and stumbled back to bed. But deep down, he knew that something was wrong. The next day, Steve noticed other strange things too. The cat seemed to vanish for hours and reappear with odd items, like a tiny silver key that didn't fit any lock in his apartment. Sometimes it would sit by the window, staring at the sky as if waiting for something to happen. He knew that cats could act a little strange sometimes. His friends had cats and told him that this behavior was normal. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. It started with a strange noise outside his building. Thud, 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 like something heavy slamming against the pavement. He peeked off his balcony, but he couldn't see anything. There was a fresh pothole or two in the pavement in the parking lot, though. How did those get there, he wondered. And then he saw them. Snake-like figures about his height were outside. At first, he thought that they were statues and that someone put them there for a joke. Their stone bodies were smooth and polished, with no mouths, but strangely expressive eyes. It wasn't until one of these snake-shaped statues suddenly pitched back and then reeled forward like a hammer, making a new pothole in the ground, that he jumped and felt his heart racing. "What the heck are those?" he said. They moved in an eerie rhythm, hammering themselves against the ground as they searched for something. What were they looking for? Were they looking for the cat? Terrified, he locked his door, and he locked his windows too. He tried to ponder what he should do. They should be fine. After all, the snakes didn't have any hands, and they wouldn't be able to open up the door to get up in the elevator, would they? He was on the second floor, and there was no way that they could reach him or the cat. Before he could think much more, he heard the telltale sound of the elevator down the hall from him give a loud ding. He heard Miss Donovan, his elderly neighbor with bad eyesight, walking down to her apartment from the elevator. "Have a nice day, young man," she said. Fearing the worst, Steve opened his door and peeked out. One of the snake statues was gliding up the hallway. She'd brought it up the elevator. She couldn't see it. She thought it was a man. He gasped and backed away from the door. He ran to the living room and saw the cat standing on the railing on the balcony outside. Strangely enough, it made a come here motion with its paw. In a trance, confused, Steve dumbly walked over to it, and it took out a magic wand, giving him a light tap on his head. His feet left the ground, and Steve hovered a few inches above the balcony. The cat took hold of his shirt lightly and jumped off the balcony as Steve coasted down like a balloon, and they landed in the seats of his convertible Bronco. So, this cat could do magic? So he hadn't imagined seeing the cat in the fridge. This cat was special. This cat was a little strange. The newest problem was that the cat had somehow ended up in the driver's seat of the truck. He could see the snake statues making their way toward them, and they would have to switch seats quickly if they wanted to get away. What the? Steve reeled backward and almost rolled into the back seat as the car took off with a loud roar of the engine. The cat, standing upright behind the wheel, peeled out of the parking lot with the tires spinning. He barely managed to get his seatbelt on as they sped off. "What is happening?" Steve yelled, as the cat weaved through traffic like a professional race car driver. They tore through the city, out into the countryside, where the cat suddenly veered into an open field. There, dozens of mice were scattered in the moonlight. The cat's pupils dilated with excitement as he narrowed his eyes. With a sharp turn, it chased the rodents, the car bounding over the hills as Steve clung to the dashboard. "This isn't normal!" he screamed. The cat barely seemed to hear him. It was too focused on the chase. Until a dog appeared in the distance. The cat lowered his head and growled. "Oh no," Steve whispered, as the car swerved toward the unsuspecting canine. "Don't you dare!" he yelled to the cat. Just before impact, Steve yanked the wheel. The truck missed the dog by inches, sending them spinning toward the coast. The car screeched off the road and came to a stop on the beach, with a seaside cliff right behind them. The ocean stretched out endlessly in front of them, waves crashing against the rocky shore. Steve panted. His hands were gripping the seat. Then, without warning, the cat leaped out. It twitched its tail, waved its wand, and suddenly a cozy cabin appeared at the base of the cliff. The inside was warm and inviting. Sort of. It smelled like, well, cats. A fireplace crackled, casting a golden glow over the walls. But the furniture? It was completely shredded. The floor was carpeted, but all the carpet had been tore up. It looked like claw marks. Rope-covered poles jutted up at the corners of the room to support the roof, and they were scratched too. "Are these scratching posts?" Steve asked the cat. The cat shrugged and walked over to a box of cat toys in the middle of the room, and he laid down on the rug and began to play. The bathroom only had a single litter box in it. Steve wouldn't be using that. And there were bowls of cat food next to the torn-up sofa. "Well, this is a cat paradise now, isn't it?" Steve murmured. The cat purred approvingly and curled up in front of the fire. They waited and listened. They heard nothing but the soft crackle of fire logs, and just as Steve was about to doze off, they both heard the sound again. Thud, thud, thud. Steve knew it was the statues whacking the ground with their snouts. He whipped around and peered out the window to see the curved silhouettes of the snakes standing out in the fading light on the beach as the sun dipped down below the waves. The snake statues had found them. Steve's panic surged as the statues moved closer. They weren't just looking for the cat anymore. They wanted him too. The cat stood up and stretched, yawning, completely unbothered. It opened the front door and stepped outside bravely as they coasted over the sand to claim him. With a lazy flick of its paw, it grabbed a small cat toy, a stuffed mouse, and tossed it into the air. The moment it hit the ground, a swirling portal to another dimension appeared. It was crackling with energy around the sides, and through it, Steve caught a glimpse of a strange world. towering cities made of floating platforms, cats walking upright, and creatures unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The snake statues surged forward to claim the cat, but it was already prepared. The cat twitched its tail, waved a tiny wand. Where did it even get that? And suddenly, the beach transformed. The sand melted into a slick, curving slide, and one by one, the statues began to slide uncontrollably toward the ocean. They flailed, their smooth stone bodies unable to find traction, and then one by one they splashed into the waves, sinking beneath the surface. Steve's jaw dropped. But before he could finish, the cat turned to him. It blinked slowly and then padded toward the portal. "Wait, you're leaving?" Steve asked. The cat flicked its tail in a farewell and stepped through the swirling vortex. The portal shimmered, and then, just like that, it was gone. Steve stood there in silence, the sound of the waves filling the air. Then he looked around. The cabin was still there, the shredded furniture, the scratching post, and the cat toys. "Well, guess I live in a cat hut now," he muttered. Outside, the ocean stretched on. The waves were calm once more. Steve sighed and sank into a well-clawed armchair. Somewhere, in another dimension, he was sure that the cat was getting into all sorts of trouble. And somehow, he wasn't even surprised.